What's up, guys? It's Friday night and it's time to bitch. We're not bitching this week. I've had a lot of people ask me for some more technical content or maybe mix it up a little bit, so let's give it a shot. So, one of the things that I do throughout my day to day is diag, and there's a lot of it. So, getting through diag, I think the biggest part of that is having a process that is consistent and repeatable and allows you to get to a result. How do we do that? I'll run you through my diag process and we'll talk about it in the comments. How's that sound? So the first and most important thing with any concern with a vehicle is understanding the problem, understanding the fault, when it happens, where it happens, what it does, what indications the driver gets. Climatic conditions, weather conditions, ambient stuff can all have a huge impact in that. But that's where the discovery process on the counter has got to be carried out, and it's got to be thorough. I am not unwilling to call a client to get more information if I need more. I think that's part of my responsibility to that client to give them the most complete and thorough diagnosis I can. And I can only do that if I understand the problem. Then we've got to have DTCs if it's a light concern, check engine, ABS, whatever. There's going to be DTCs associated with that. So do I scan the system that's affected? I scan the entire vehicle. Every vehicle, when I touch it, before I ever start it, gets scanned. It gets a full vehicle scan, and that scan log is attached to the repair order. That way I have a baseline. I have all of my information, in theory, freeze frame data, but as I'm sure some of you know, freeze frame data is sometimes really useless. The amount of data you can get from some of the OEs is far better. In some cases, I need to know what the concern is, so I'm going to scan it. I'm going to take it on an initial road test. If it's feasible, I'm going to duplicate the conditions on that road test of the fault. If it's not like a dead hole misfire or something like that, I'm going to duplicate that fault to the best of my ability. If it's something that requires 2 hours of driving, that's going to get time sold on it. I am not going for 2 hours for what I'm getting paid an hour for. That's just reality. I've got to make sure I know what my conditions are. I've got to make sure I know what the fault is. I've got to make sure I know when it's occurring. That's my initial, before I ever pull into the shop, I've already road tested it, scanned it. If I need to, I'll check my base fluids, coolant, oil, stuff like that, and then I'm on the road. So when I get into the shop, I will upload everything, and then I'm going to sit down and understand the system. Before I do anything with the vehicle, I am going to research that system. I'm going to check my codes, whatever's relevant. Obviously, there are some vehicles that are going to have 100 codes in them that are not relevant, but I'm going to look at my relevant codes. They're relevant to that fault and understand what that system is doing, who's doing it, who is giving it info to make that decision directly, who's giving it indirectly, what's coming over network. And then I'm going to look through my data for who's not talking, who is. A lot of times, and as you gain experience, you'll learn what systems are interconnected, at least the core systems, and you can kind of make a determination on where you need to go. Sometimes you don't. Sometimes I do need to take a second road test if I made an assumption and I was wrong. I've got to get it right. At the end of the day, I have to get it right the first time. Understanding the who's, what's, and why's is the first step of understanding the how. A misfire, are you missing fuel? Are you missing spark? Are you missing air? In the sense of compression, do you have a piston that checked out? Do you have a valve with a big hole burned in it? Or do you just have a dead coil? How do you figure that out? Next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to build a test plan. I'm going to look at what could be my contributors, who is controlling those contributors, who is telling me that who's telling whatever module's in charge that those contributors aren't working, or telling them when to work. Where are my timing signals? Where are whatever it is? Let's say for a misfire, again, that coil is being told to fire at a specific time based on inputs from the cam and crank sensors. Probably going to be some other things in there as well. Pressure sensors, MAP sensor, MAF sensor. Those are going to have some influence on how long to fire, where do we want to overlap? How much fuel are we shooting in? But primaries are going to be timing, right? They're always going to be primarily timing sensors. Do we have just a checked out feedback sensor that's turning a coil off? Toyota with their feedbacks, those were notoriously tricky back in the day, where they wouldn't send data. Everything was running right, but you would have misfire codes because you weren't getting a feedback signal. So you have to understand the system. At the end of the day, you have to understand the hows, whats, and whys of the system. I'm going to build a plan based on what I'm testing. Am I going to be checking out a coil, an injector? Am I going to do relative compression? Probably going to do all of the above, but figuring out ways that I can do that quickly and efficiently, and if possible in one shot, that's pretty big, and that can save a ton of time. Now, where do I need to go to resolve that? Well, I need to look at who's doing what, who's giving the info. Do we have an input problem? Do we have a network problem? Do we have an output problem? Or do we have a component problem? So we have to make that determination, figure out our resolution, and then after that resolution is executed, we need to verify it. That means we need to take another road test or duplicate the conditions of the fault, probably go outside of that envelope and go a little wider. If I'm on my verification drive, I want it to break. I'm trying to break it. I'm trying to duplicate that fault again so I know that it's fixed. I would much rather have a vehicle break on me than on my client. I'm a little more equipped to deal with it than they are in most cases. The other big thing that we have to do is every one of these steps has to be documented. I have the issue where I will go very technical on my write-ups. Clients don't care about technical. Some do, but they're the minority. For the most part, they don't even care what's broken and what needs to be done to fix it. They just want to know when. At the end of the day, we have to cover ourselves. We have to document everything. What happens when it comes back with a similar or the same problem in 6 months? Is that a screw up on your part, or is there something else that checked out? It happens. These are complex machines. There's a lot of moving parts. There's a lot of electronic parts. Things fail. So I don't necessarily subscribe to they fail in batches. I've replace one coil to have another one fail in a month. I'm not going to sell somebody $1,000 worth of coils because I have one dead coil, but if I have a reason or I have reasonable suspicion, if I have oil contamination, something like that, then I will. But we can't make them buy it, right? All we can do is tell them and they've got to make the decision. The best way they can make a decision is with all available information broken down into simple terms. I'm not afraid to admit I use AI for a lot of that because I am not good at breaking it down in terminology that's usable by a client. I know what I'm looking at based on my notes. Most techs that I work with generally know what I'm saying. Clients don't. They don't understand these systems, and I'm pretty immune to that sometimes. Clear, concise documentation with photos, with completion pictures, all of that stuff builds a lot of trust. It covers your ass, and it makes things a lot easier to run through. That way anybody can pick that ticket up, read it, look at it, understand what's going on, and understand what was done. If my front counter sends a ticket back to me, I didn't write it well enough. That is 100% how I approach that. If they don't understand it, or they can't understand the broken down side of it, then I need to go back and redo it because I didn't do it well enough. And if they don't believe in it, they're not going to sell it. They're not going to have faith in it. And it's not a lack of trust in the tech, but if they don't understand it and they can't comprehend what they're saying is needed, then it's not going to get sold, right? They've got to have confidence. There's got to be trust there between both, but there's got to be confidence in what's being sold, that it was tested, it was definitively failed, and this is what we have to do. In the case where you can't duplicate, then you have to go off of what information you have. It's not my favorite thing to do, but if I can't duplicate a fault, well, here's our options. We can replace this based on what I have. We can wait for it to get worse. You got to make the decision, but always put the ball back in their court. We didn't design it, we didn't build it, we didn't drive it, we didn't buy it, and we did not break it. We simply wish to fix it. Have a good week, guys. Let me know what you think. Drop me a like, drop me a subscribe, and yeah, let's get some conversation going.